If you're a WordPress developer and you've mastered classic theme development and you want to explore the new block theme approach to full site editing, then you're in the right place. In this video, I'm going to show you my approach to modern WordPress block theme development. So let's dive in. Block themes represent a modern approach to full site editing inspired by the block editor, which in turn is powered by Gutenberg. In contrast, WordPress theme developers would need to have a fairly extensive knowledge of PHP to create themes, which are now referred to as classic themes. Block themes simplify this process, allowing developers to create fairly simple HTML themes, lowering the barrier to entry for WordPress enthusiasts, and also adds the benefit of using a block-based approach to building websites through the full site editing experience. This leverages the full capability of using the block editor, allowing you to easily rearrange, add and remove blocks to create unique layouts without the necessity for advanced coding skills. Also behind the scenes, WordPress core blocks already have responsive design considerations built in, meaning that if you take the block theme approach, websites will display optimally on both desktop and mobile. And as always, WordPress continues to evolve, so by taking the block theme approach serves as a great strategy for future-proofing your website. I just wanted to drop a quick note. I've genuinely enjoyed every moment of putting this video together. If you've stuck around until now and enjoyed it too, giving it a thumbs up or hitting the subscribe would mean a lot. I pour my heart into these videos, everything from recording and editing to composing, producing and mixing the music, plus writing the script. Your like or subscription not only feels great, but also motivates me to keep creating. It goes a long way in reaching a wider audience and making more content like this. If you're into it, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Now, let's get back to what you're really here for. I just want to explain some of the tools and the versions of those tools I'll be using at the time of recording this video. I'll be using Firefox with the built-in developer tools. I'll also be using WordPress 6.4.1. I'll also be installing the Create Block Theme plugin. I'll be using VS Code for editing code and also using the built-in terminal. I'll be using SQL Pro for reading and editing the database, and I'll be utilizing WP CLI for various tasks. So I've received permission from an existing client to transition their current classic WordPress theme into a modern block theme. Now the goal here is to conduct a site audit to identify existing settings and styles that will be applicable to my new block theme. The site audit is crucial for a smooth transition and ensures that no essential settings or styles are overlooked. My audit here, and I've got some notes on some colors, and I've also picked up some headers that have got some case styling, so I need to make sure that I use the same style there. I've also got a font that's been picked up in the current theme called Roboto. Well, there's some weights used which range from 300 to 700, and I need to include those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these styles as the basis to, or the foundation for our theme.json file, and they'll be used in the new block theme. So the next thing I need to do is to actually create a local site, and I'm going to use WP CLI for that. Now if you don't know how to use that, I'll leave a link in this video on the top right here to a practical guide on using WP CLI. But basically I've got a script that will download WordPress, install it, create a database and get me up and running with a local site with all the plugins I need installed, and particularly the Create Block Theme plugin. So I'll go ahead and start doing that. So I've set up a local website folder named Holding Hands, and within this folder I've added some scripts that I use to streamline the entire process of creating a local WordPress installation. In the script are all the details for downloading the WordPress core, to creating a database and configuring the website. All I need to do is open up my terminal and execute the script. Okay, so now if I pop to my browser, so I'm just going to log in. So my site is set up, the Create Block Theme plugin is activated, but instead of using the plugin to generate the block theme, initially I'm going to take the manual approach. This will give you a deeper understanding of the process and just show you only need a few components to enable full site editing. So after the manual process, I will come back to use the Create Block Theme plugin to replicate the same process. Now this dual approach will ensure you get a comprehensive understanding of both methods. So I'll head back to my code editor to start the manual setup for creating a block theme. set up the foundations for my block theme, I'll start by creating a folder named Holding Hands, and this will serve as my theme folder. Now within this folder I'll create two subfolders, one for templates and one for parts. These are essential components for activating a block theme, and I'll also need to add two crucial files in the theme folder, one for style.css and one for the theme.json file. Now in the templates folder I'll need an index.html file, and in the parts folder I'll create two more files, a header.html and a footer.html. And additionally I'll include a blank index.php file in the root of my theme folder. Within the index.php I'll add PHP tags and a comment that says silence is golden. Now this ensures if someone tries to access the theme folder directly via a browser, the index.php file will load and it will just be a blank screen, and it will hide the folder's content from prying eyes. So next I'll populate the style.css file with some basic information required for a block theme. Now the bare minimum here is to simply specify the theme name, and that will make the block theme full site editing ready. And that's it. Now I'll add some other information I need in my theme.json file. Now since this is a JSON format, I'm going to open up an object with curly braces. The initial entry to include in this file is known as a $schema, and here it refers to a schema file that's hosted on wp.org and it's named theme.json. Now with the schema in place, it's designed to make your code editor pop up some autocomplete suggestions from a validated list. And you'll notice here as I type, I can just select what I need. So firstly, I'm going to specify a version number because there are various versions of the theme.json file, and the one I'm working with is version 2. I also want a settings object, and I'm going to leave that blank for now, and the same goes for a styles object. Now, this is the basic structure for my theme.json file, and as I build my theme, I'll revisit this file and add more properties as I go along. So if I return back to my main site and navigate to my theme under Appearance and Themes, you'll see that the theme's been populated, and all I need to do is just activate that. Now my site is ready for full site editing, and to go into full site editing, just click the editor link under the Appearance section. And you'll notice within the templates we have an index, and that is coming from the index.html file we set up in our theme earlier. And for the parts section, which is hidden under the patterns, you'll see that you can manage all template parts, and here we'll find our header and our footer, which are the blank HTML files that we created in our theme. So if I return back to my code editor, coming from my templates folder is the index.html file, and from my parts folder, the header and footer HTML files. So let's revisit our theme.json file. I've added the reference to the schema, and we can click this link in VS Code to visit the page, where we'll find definitions, properties, descriptions, types, and default values. Now these are where the autocomplete come from as we type in our code editor. Now let me illustrate this. In settings, as I type, I can automatically get suggestions for properties, such as appearance tools. And notice the little arrow here. If I click on it, it displays a description for that property. So I can scroll through all of these to get a better understanding of each of those properties and what those settings do. Now this is only possible because the $scheme is set. Now let me demonstrate this without the schema set. Now as I type and open up quotes, none of the autocomplete properties appear. So by adding the schema to your theme.json file is going to be beneficial during development. Now I'll demonstrate one of these settings. I'll demo the appearance tools property, and by default it's set to false. So we'll leave it as it is, but you can see in the description it says setting that enables the following UI tools: background, border, color, dimensions, etc. So with that set to false, we go back to the editor, and I want to focus on the header. So I'm going to add a group block, and I want to change, say, some padding. Now if I go to my settings, under my styles, we currently only have colors and typography. I actually want to edit the padding. Now this is because appearance tools is set to false. So changing it to true and then refreshing my page will reveal new settings, including dimensions and padding. Now there's one more important thing that I want to do in my wp config file, and that is to define the wp_development_ mode. And I want to set this to theme. So this ensures no caching occurs during theme development. Now, there's nothing more annoying than making changes in your code and then refreshing your page and nothing happening. So by defining the WP development mode and setting it to theme, this will eliminate all of that from happening. So another approach to creating a block theme is through a plugin. Now, this happens to be the quickest and most straightforward method for developing a block theme. However, opting for the manual process offers a deeper understanding of what the plugin is actually doing. So let's create a block theme using the Create Block Theme plugin. Once installed, navigate to Appearance and you'll find a link that says Create Block Theme. So go ahead and click on it. For this demonstration, I'll create a blank theme. Now provide all the essential details. These details will be populated in the styles.css file. Unlike the manual method where I only added the theme name, this plugin enables you to include all the standard details typically found in a classic styles.css header. So go ahead and generate the theme. Now I'll head over to my code editor and you'll notice the theme has been created in the themes folder, structured like a typical block theme would be, including the parts and templates folders, along with a readme.txt file and a screenshot. All the details entered through the plugin are now in the styles.css file. Now, contrary to the manual process, the theme.json is slightly different. The schema is adjusted to match the WordPress version installed, and certain decisions have been pre-made for the settings. There's an additional template parts object, and the version has been set to 2. Now, as WordPress evolves, inevitably the theme.json will also adapt. These decisions are likely made to leverage new features and best practices for the current WordPress version during the creation of the block theme using the plugin. We can also refer to this version of the schema for definitions, descriptions and properties, if they indeed have changed. If you choose this method, it's perfectly fine. In this video, I'll be switching between making manual changes and saving them to the database, and I'll elaborate more on this in the next steps. So if you recall the details I collected during the site audit for colours, heading styles and fonts, next I'll apply those styles to the new theme. Before diving into the build of your block theme's settings and styles, it's essential to understand what happens when WordPress loads your theme for the first time, or when a user installs and activates it. After the activation of the theme, WordPress begins to read the theme.json file and all the configuration settings and styles set by the developer. Subsequently, user interactions that change those settings and styles are then stored in the database from the WordPress user interface known as global styles. Anything specified in the theme.json file and not present in the global styles continues to be retrieved from the theme.json file. However, if these settings and styles are modified and set within the global styles, they will override the developer's initial configurations in the theme.json file. Moreover, any settings and styles can be further overridden by the blocks inserted into posts and pages individually. In summary, the process unfolds as follows. The theme initially loads and processes settings and styles outlined in the theme.json file. Next, the global styles are read and any absent settings are assimilated or overridden by the global styles. Lastly, if a block contains a specific setting or style, it takes precedence over the global styles. So to illustrate this, I'll make changes in my theme.json file, then I'll save them to the global styles, effectively overriding the theme.json configuration. I'll also demonstrate how block settings can further override global styles, focusing on the concept of layout, content width and wide widths, specifically in the context of the group block. Now currently our content size is set to 620 pixels and the wide size is set to 1000 pixels in the theme.json file. I'll modify the wide size to 800 pixels because once we're in the editor it will be more obvious due to the current width constraints of this video. So save the file and then navigate back to WordPress. Entering the site editor, under patterns, I'll need to go to manage all template parts and then edit the header. So now we're in the header. Under the list view, you can see we have a group, heading section and a spacer. And what I want to do is add another group block after the spacer, then nest a new cover block. And just so that we can see what's going on, I'll set a color background to the new cover block. Now take a look at the cover block's alignment. It reflects the values set in our theme.json file. 620 pixels if set to none, which represents the content size, and 800 pixels for wide size. Now to emphasize this, I'll add some text inside the cover block to indicate that these dimensions align with the theme.json settings. And subsequently, I'll add another cover block after this one, this time selecting the wide alignment option. This time the wide alignment option will reflect the updated theme.json settings of 800 pixels that I set earlier. And again, to emphasize this, I'll add text inside the cover block to indicate that these dimensions align with the theme.json settings. Now to access the global styles, click the styles icon in the top right hand corner and then select the layout settings. And we can confirm that both the content and wide widths are originated from the theme.json file. And to show this, I'll put my code editor side by side with the global styles for the layout settings. Now, altering the values in the global styles will override the theme.json settings, as you can see in this real-time preview. Now, by adjusting the content width to 500 pixels, again to emphasize this, I'll change the text in the content block to indicate that these dimensions are now coming from the global styles. And adjusting the wide width to 700 pixels in the global settings, and again changing the text inside the cover block to indicate that, we can see that these changes are now independent of the theme.json file and are governed by the global styles. Saving these modifications adds them directly to the global styles in the database. Despite these global settings, individual block settings still remain customizable, and again we can override the global styles. Duplicating the blocks allows me to demonstrate that these settings are indeed derived from the global settings, but first let me adjust the height of these blocks so we can see everything in the viewable space. By adding another cover block with a distinctly different color and setting it to wide, you can see that the content and the wide widths are influenced by the global settings. Now, by manipulating the group block settings enables further customization, as you can see if I change the content width to 300 pixels and a wide width to 400 pixels. These changes now supersede both theme.json file and the global styles, illustrating now how the override of block settings takes precedence. And finally, I wanted to get across the concept of group blocks and the implications of choosing between a row, stack, or group options. So by choosing to use a group, it will provide you with access to alignment options of inner blocks, whereas selecting row or stack will transition the alignment options to flexbox. And by doing so, will limit your choice of using content, wide, or indeed full width options on your inner blocks. So just to summarize, this demonstrates and highlights the intricate interplay between the theme.json set by the developer, the global styles overridden by the user, and indeed the block settings again override by the user, emphasizing the order of precedence when it comes to overriding configurations. So with these concepts clarified, we can continue with the build of our theme. But first of all, I want to clear up all of this useful rubbish that I've created to get that across. Previously, we conducted a site audit identifying default colors and styles for our WordPress block theme. Now we're going to dive into customizing the color palette to give our site a unique look. In the site audit, I picked up some default colors from the current color branding. I'll be working on fully customizing the color palette and to disable the default colors that come from WordPress. Let's head to the site editor and manage all templates, focusing on the header for consistency as we did previously. We want to pick an element to access the color palettes without delving into the global styles for the moment. So select a block element. Let's navigate to styles and examine the default colors inherited from WordPress, which by default are opinionated. However, for our specific site, we want to fully customize the color palette. So disabling the default palette will be our first step. Remember, disabling the default colors means losing access to essential colors like black and white. So we'll need to remember to add them back in with our own custom color palette. Now let's see how we can disable the default palette and add our own custom color palette. So heading back to the code editor, we'll edit our theme.json file and make these changes. Let's review the settings and focus on the color section. We're looking for a palette setting specifically for custom color presets. By setting the default palette to false, we disable the default colors. Now let's add our custom color palette presets. Within the color section, we find the palette setting where we can add our custom colors. Each color is defined by a name, slug, and a color represented by a hexadecimal code reference. Remember, the slug is a sanitized version of the name, so all lowercase without spaces or hyphens to represent the spaces in its simplest form. Let's add our corporate colors: dark green, light green, charcoal, and dark charcoal. And of course, we'll add the black and white that came from the default color settings. Now back to our site editor, let's refresh the page and select a block to see our custom color palettes in action. And there it is, a unique color palette coming directly from our theme.json file. And that's it for customizing the color palette. In the next section, we'll dive into adjusting heading styles and fonts. before we continue, let's just have a recap on the theme.json and why you should be using the schema reference and why it's so useful for settings and styles. And to do that, we need to enable settings, typography, and font sizes. And font sizes is an array, so that means we can add multiple items. And within font sizes, each object requires a name, size, and slug, and there's an additional optional fluid. Now, because we have our schema set, this allows us to mouse over any one of the properties and pop up a description of what that property actually does. And this is really useful for things like font sizes. You'll notice that on font sizes it gives us the custom property that we can later on use in our styles. And this applies to any one of the properties. As long as the schema is set, you'll get a description as you mouse over that property. To globally set the font size to one of our elements, for instance the H1 element, all we need to do is to set the properties for the styles, elements, H1, typography, font size. And to use the font size set in our settings, all we need to do is to mouse over the settings property, copy the custom property preset, and paste it into our styles property value. And because this is a CSS variable, we just need to wrap it in the CSS var function. Then replace the slug reference with the value set in our settings. So now that we've got some colours set, we can go ahead and set some fonts, styles, and weights. Now, if we review our audit, we can see that we've got some H1 and H3 style settings. We've also got a setting for a font, and we've got some weight settings as well. So as we did with the colours, we're going to go ahead and change our theme.json file to reflect the styles that we've got from our audit. Now, as of WordPress 6.4, there was supposed to be some font management released, but that was actually pushed to 6.5, so that's due to be released. But fortunately, because we're using the Create Block Theme plugin, we can actually utilize the font management system that the plugin provides. But first of all, I want to just review our theme.json file. If I go to my code editor, now we can observe in our settings, we've got a section for typography. Now, this is currently set to a system font, and that's actually been provided by the Create Block Theme plugin as a default. So if we pop back to our site editor, and we need to go back to the dashboard, and under Appearance, we'll see that we've got Manage Theme Fonts. Now in here, we've got our system font that was actually set when we first generated our theme. Now we remove that, and then if I pop back to my site editor, we'll see that immediately in the typography the font family has been removed. So by using the plugin font management system, not only will that update your theme that's currently active, it will also update your theme.json file. So if we go back to our site editor, and the font we want is Roboto. So if we go to add Google font, and then we do a search, select our Roboto font, and we want to go ahead and add 300 weight normal, 500 weight normal, and a 700 weight normal. And we can add fonts to your theme, and it's telling us that the font has been added to our theme. So we can check that by going back to our code editor, and as we can see, we've got our typography, font families, and Roberto has been set up with its slug and all of the relevant sizes. There's also a property for the source, and that is telling us the source is a file in the assets directory, fonts directory, and a link to the font TTF file. So if we just look in our theme folder, and as we can see, we've got assets, fonts, and then we've got 3 fonts reflecting our 300, 500, and 700 weight. Now, what we need to do also is to set the style. So we have another setting here. After settings, we can add in another setting or another property for styles. And then within the styles, we can add in typography, and we can set the font family to a string. And to reference that string, all we need to do is to go back to our settings and then our font family. And you can see that we've got a custom property here that's listed, and it says WP preset font family followed by the slug, which is shown as a variable. And because we've got the schema referenced, we get the benefit of this information. So quite simply, all I'm going to do is copy that custom property, and then I'm going to come back down to my styles, and I'm going to input here. Now the way to input the reference is to type var, which stands for variable in CSS, wrap it in brackets, and then reference the WP preset font family, followed by the slug, which is Roboto, and we can save that. And if we revisit our site editor, going to editor and then patterns, manage all template parts and our header, we can see that now our font is pulling the Roboto font that we've set in our theme.json file. So we need to add some more details in our theme.json file. So I'm going to pop back to my code editor and specifically guff, should be able to select small, medium, large, extra large and large. Perfect. So there we go. We've got our site set up with some font weights, font sizes and styles, and that will conclude this section. Before I continue, I just need to retrieve some specific settings for the existing site using the inspector. You'll notice that there's an element spanning the entire layout of the page with some padding on a container named container inner. So I head over to my CSS rules, filter out that class, and I can see that that is set to 1100 pixels. So I'll copy that out and add it to my audit file for reference when I'm configuring my new block theme. Next, I need more info on the green border right at the top of the website. So using the inspector again, I can see that it's probably in a div element with the class name of header inner. So instead of scrolling through all of the rules, again, I can copy the class, and using the filter to filter out the CSS rule, I find a border top setting of 5 pixels in solid green. So I'll copy this out and add this to my audit file for reference again. I also want to check the logo settings. So again, I'll use the inspector to select the image, and it turns out to be 1000 pixels wide by 270 pixels high. Again, I'll make a note of this in my audit file, and this will help me when setting up the styles and settings in my full site editing experience. Moving on, I want to gather all the content and their respective authors from the existing site. To do this, I'll go to Tools and Export. I'll select all content and click the Download Export file. This will download an XML file containing all the data I need to upload to my new site. This provides me a starting point for configuring my new block theme with real content from an existing website. To import the XML file, all I need to do is go to my new site, go to Tools and choose Import. I'll run the importer, browse to the XML file and upload it, enable download and import file attachments. Now, although this XML upload fails in some cases, this is because I don't have all the plugins installed on my new site. This is done for good reason because I want to keep it clean and fresh. But this process will ensure the transfer of all posts and pages, and it will help me set up my navigation. So checking my front end, I can see that I've got all my posts and some default navigation, but clearly this will need some adjustment. Now, another tool I like to use is called Pixel Perfect Pro, and this allows me to overlay custom visual layouts or screenshots of existing pages to ensure I get a perfect match in positioning and layout. So I'll position my overlay on top of my new website, and once I'm satisfied, I can lock that in place, then toggle it on and off and monitor the progress of the design of my new block theme. So immediately I notice that there's a width issue here. So my first step is to navigate to my theme.json file and adjust the content size and wide size. So I can see that the content size is too narrow. So I'll set this to the width that I obtained in my audit file, which is 1100 pixels. So copying that value and pasting into the content size property. And additionally, I'll change the wide size to create a differentiation between the two. And I'll set this to 1200 pixels. Now, after saving these changes, I can go to the front end of my new website and refresh the page and clearly see that the width for my new block theme has indeed updated. Now, it appears that the header has a wider width for the navigation, but the content width seems about right. So let me explain how the theme.json settings relate to the site editor. So in the theme.json file, under the layout settings, for the content size we've set 1100 pixels, and for the wide size we've set 1200 pixels. Now, these values correlate directly in the site editor's alignment settings in the toolbar. So if we set it to none, the content size is set to 1100 pixels, but if we set this to wide, it picks up the wide size of 1200 pixels from the theme.json file. So this understanding is crucial as we progress with our site and engage with the full site editing experience. So with this information, we can proceed with building our header. So I've created the template part for the header, incorporating various elements such as the 5 pixel top green border, a logo using the site logo block, and configured the navigation to replicate the existing site. Now the final step is to adjust the alignment width from wide to none, which correlates to the content size alignment set in the theme.json file, bringing things in line with the site audit where the site width is set to 1100 pixels. When I hit save, the header template part code is now stored directly in the database. Now it's essential to understand that these changes made in the site editor, similar to the theme.json file versus the global styles, these changes are now saved to the database. This includes templates and template parts. Now, by saving the header template part directly to the database, it becomes independent of the theme files in the theme folder. Therefore, any alterations made in the theme folder to the header.html file will no longer impact the header's appearance. It now originates directly from the database. Now, to demonstrate this detachment, refreshing the front end of the site still renders the header, even after removing the corresponding code in the header.html file in the theme folder. The header's content is now solely driven by the database. However, this might not be ideal for commercial themes or theme installations where all the appearance, styles and settings should actually be initialized from the theme folder. So to address this, you can either directly copy the code from the database by locating the post type WP template part with the post name and title of header, or if you're not comfortable interacting directly with the database, you can do the same through the site editor. So in the site editor, navigate to the template part in question. In this case, it's the header. And under the options represented by the three dots, switch to the code editor, where you can see the code. Copy this code, exit the editor, and paste it directly into your theme header.html file and save the file. This ensures that the header appearance is now replicated in the theme rather than the site editor or what is database driven. Additionally, if you need to revert to the theme settings, you can clear customization in the site editor, settings under the template parts. By selecting clear customization, the header template will now adhere to the theme's header HTML file rather than the database driven code in the header custom post type part. Saving this adjustment removes the reference to the header template part referenced in the database. To confirm this, refresh the database and you'll notice that the WP template part for the header no longer exists. And when it comes to templates, the process is exactly the same with the exception of the name of the post type saved to the database. The post type name is simply named WP template as opposed to WP template part. If you're familiar with classic theme development in WordPress, you'll likely be aware of the inclusion of various templates such as the single.php, page.php, category.php, plus much more. Adhering to the WordPress template hierarchy, if a specific template is not available, the system gracefully falls back to the index.php file as a default. This is exactly the same for block themes in WordPress. If a particular template is absent, the system seamlessly defaults to the fallback template, typically index.html. In essence, the structure and fallback mechanism for block themes closely mirrors the principles established in classic theme development. This consistently provides both flexibility and a user-friendly approach to theme development. With this in mind, when accessing the site editor in WordPress, there are two distinct paths, each serving a specific purpose in full site editing and template editing. The first method involves navigating through the dashboard by going to Appearance and selecting Editor. This takes you into the comprehensive site editor design area and provides access to all parts of the site, making it a versatile option for overall design adjustments. The second approach is through the front end by clicking the Edit Site link in the admin bar. This method is particularly useful when editing templates based on the logic template hierarchy. If the specific template exists, the editor will navigate to that specific template. It's worth noting that currently only the index.html file exists in our theme folder. When using the front-end approach and clicking the Edit Site link from the admin bar on the home page, on a single post, or on a page, the user will consistently be directed to edit the index.html file. Now I'll create a page.html file in the template folder of our theme. To do this, I'll duplicate the index.html file in my code editor, then rename it to page.html. Navigate to a page in the front end of my site and then clicking the Edit Site link in the admin bar, you'll notice that this now takes me to the site editor where I can edit the pages template. I'll go to the list view and you'll notice the query loop block. This is unnecessary for a page template, so I'll simplify this by moving the group that contains the title, featured image and content to below the header. Now I'll remove the query loop block, which is specifically for blog posts or archives, so I don't need it for a page template. And if I close the list view, you'll see that the alignment of the content is now filling the width of the site. This isn't right. So open the list view again, and I'll further group the existing group to nest it in a group block. At this point, it would be sensible to rename the top parent group to something like content section. Now the alignment of the nested group will be set to none, meaning it will be set to the content size coming from the theme.json file, which is 1100 pixels. So I've taken a screenshot of a typical page from my source site and added it to Pixel Perfect Pro. I plan to use this screenshot as an overlay to create a title banner. Ultimately, I intend to bundle it with my theme as a pattern rather than save it to the database. This is because saving it to the database would make the pattern independent of the theme and locked to this specific database and site. My goal is for it to be locked to the theme, so wherever this theme is installed, any patterns I've created are available and linked to the theme. So I'll go ahead and set up this layout using blocks, and when I come back, I'll show you how I accomplish this. At this stage, I want to ensure that the template is sourced from my theme folder rather than the database. After making all these changes, I'll navigate to the options and access the code editor from within the site editor. From there, I'll select all the code and copy it. Next, I'll switch to my theme in my code editor, select my page.html template, select all the code and paste the copied code into the file. This step is crucial to guarantee that the code originates from my template and not the database. So returning back to the site in the site editor, I can now continue building my block theme with the reassurance that the template is now coming from my theme folder. With my banner set up, I now want to create it as a pattern. Typically, this would involve selecting a group of blocks, then using the options or the three dots in the toolbar, you'd select Create Pattern. However, this would save it directly to the database, and that's not what I want. I want to make this pattern exclusive to my theme. To achieve this, simply select Copy, then return to your code editor. Within the themes directory, create a folder named Patterns. Inside this folder, create a new file named after the pattern you wish to call it. In my case, I'll name it Title Banner. .php. Using PHP is the recommended method as WordPress uses its own wrapper that allows for dynamic data such as referencing images and other elements relative to the theme folder. Unlike template parts and templates, here we need to include some header fields with opening PHP tags. And similar to the styles.css file, create a comment section, also known as a header. To do this, use / followed by 2 asterisks to ensure it's treated as a comment. So include 2 required parameters in the header, a title followed by a colon specifying the name of the pattern, in my case title banner, and a slug, which is a lowercase replication of the title with no spaces. Now I'd also recommend using a categories field, as this will help WordPress locate the patterns in the correct place in the site editor. Closing the PHP tags. So in this file, paste the copied blocks you copied from the site editor, hit save, return to the site, then navigate to all patterns in the site editor. Your pattern should now include the one you've just created. Now it's locked because it's part of the theme and not the database. However, you can duplicate it. Creating a copy of the original pattern will add a new one to the database, but the original will still be locked to the theme. Though this process functions adequately, a minor issue still remains that requires attention. Since we've directly copied the code from the site editor, there's a slight problem. Copying the blocks directly from the site editor also copies the path references to any images that are relative to the site itself. This isn't ideal for our purposes. The image is currently referencing the site, and we want it to be dynamically coming from our theme folder, regardless of where the theme is activated. To address this, the recommended approach is to add an images folder within your assets folder. Then place the image you want to use as a placeholder in this images folder. So I have a copy of an image on my desktop, and I'll go ahead and copy this to my assets / images folder in my theme. In the title banner.php file, I'll open up some PHP tags, echo out a special WordPress function that will dynamically fetch my image from the theme folder. And for security reasons, I need to wrap the echo in the escape URL function. Now while I'm here, I'll close the PHP tags. Within the escape function, I'll call the WordPress function getThemeFileURI to dynamically retrieve the file directly from my theme folder. This function requires a string reference to the path where the image resides in my theme folder. In this case, it would be under assets / images, followed by the name of the image file. To simplify this, I'll copy the file name and paste it to the end of my string. Now, my theme will dynamically pick up the image using the WordPress function. I also need to remove the ID reference provided in the block code copied earlier from the HTML block comments. This reference is no longer coming from an ID, it's coming directly from the assets/images folder. Additionally, I'll add the same reference to the image source tag for the HTML markup. Again, this uses the same function called getThemeFileURI, so I'll simply copy and paste the same PHP code. This code also contains a class with an image ID reference, which needs to be removed to prevent any issues. So in summary, we've replaced the relative path with a dynamic path and removed the references to an ID. I've done this in two places, in the block comment and in the image tag HTML markup. Now, if I save this and go back to my site editor to refresh my patterns, nothing should change. It's still being picked up from my theme folder, but now it's dynamic to the theme folder itself rather than relative to the site. Now, although the pattern has been successfully created and it's dynamic, pulling from our theme, a check of our template file reveals that the cover block is still hard-coded in the page.html file. This is not what we want. We want to reference the pattern in the same way that we reference template parts. So to achieve this, we can replace the cover block with a pattern block. In doing so, we can use the following syntax: WP:/pattern, slug, and the title, using HTML comments, ensuring that you include the slug name, identical to what is assigned in the pattern within the curly braces. Finally, make sure to terminate the comment for the block reference, save the file, and return to the site editor to check in templates and pages. We might not see any changes immediately, so to confirm this, we can refresh the page, and as anticipated, nothing appears to have changed. So to validate that this pattern is coming from our page.html template, we can insert a test string, and after saving, we can go back to the block editor, refresh the page, and observe if the test string changes, and it verifies that the content is now sourced from our page.html template. Now, although this will work, it's advisable to give the slug the namespace of your theme, which is typically the text domain, and you can check that in your style.css file. This will avoid any other conflicts with any other patterns. In this instance, the theme is named Holding Hands, and the slug should be referenced as Holding Hands/title banner. Consequently, in the template page.html, the reference should be exactly the same. So the slug should be Holding Hands/title banner. Once again, a quick check by refreshing the page in the site editor confirms that the content is still being picked up from our theme. Now I'm at a point where I can review the changes I've made and how they correlate to the site I'm trying to match. And I've noticed that the navigation in my theme isn't quite right. Specifically, there's differences in the upper lowercase usage, and the font size is slightly different compared to the original site. The original site has a smaller font and uses uppercase lettering in the navigation. Additionally, the body text in my theme is slightly different, being a bit larger and thinner. This is also another aspect I need to address. Similar to what I did before, I'll inspect the original site, take notes on the font styling for both the navigation and body text, and add them to my audit file. Now I can set these notes aside. So to make these adjustments, I plan to modify the styling of the core blocks. So this entails diving back into my theme.json file. In my theme.json file, I need to add another property in the styles object for the blocks, and then a property for the core/navigation. And because I'm dealing with typography, I need another object for the typography property. And referring back to my audit from the original site, I can set the font size, font style, font weight, and text transform. Now with those set, I can repeat the process by adding another property object for the core/paragraph block. And again, within this object, set the property for the typography. And again, referring back to my site audit, I can set the font size, line height, fonts, style, font weight, and set the margin top and bottom. Now when it comes to margin or padding, you have to add another property, and this property is called spacing. Unlike CSS, there is no shorthand, you have to set them individually. So I'll set my top and bottom margin according to the site audit, and now I can check what I've set against the original site styling. I'm quite pleased with the progress I've made so far. The styling of the navigation and the body text is closely aligned with the existing site. So following the same principles I used earlier, I went ahead and built the footer. Afterwards, I copied the blocks from the list view and returned to my code editor to locate the footer.html file where I pasted all the code. Now I repeated this process to create a new pattern for the contact call to action. However, there is still some styling issues with the buttons. If you compare them to the existing site, you'll notice there's a difference in styling. Now I could go back to the theme.json file and start styling the buttons, but there's one final thing I want to show you that is a game changer when it comes to developing a block theme. Up until this point, I've shown you the manual process as well as leveraging the Create Block Theme plugin to develop a modern block theme for WordPress. But there's an even simpler way to do this. So let me demonstrate. This time I'm going to leverage WordPress to build my theme.json file specifically using the global styles. And this can be done for any element or block on your site. But for now, let's focus on the buttons block. First, I'll navigate to my settings, ensuring that I'm working at a block level. I'll set the style to outline and the text color to white. Then I'm going to move to my global styles and navigate to blocks and find the button block. I'll ensure that the style variation is set to outline. I'll adjust the font to 11 pixels. I'll set the letter spacing to 1 pixel. I'll set the letter case to uppercase. I'll set the padding top and bottom to 2 units and the left and right padding to 4 units. I'll also set the border width to 1 pixel and finally the radius to 4 pixels. Now reviewing the button against my original site, you can see that it now aligns more closely with the original style. Saving this to the database prompts a notification that my pages and custom styles have changed. I'll disable pages since I'm only interested in the custom styles and the global styles that fundamentally are going to create the theme.json file that I want. After saving, I can come to my options, go to export and generate a zip file of my theme. Now with the zip file downloaded, I'll open it up in my code editor. Now although it contains all the assets, my focus is on the theme.json file. So I'll scroll down to the styles. You'll notice a new core block for the core button with the specific variations set to outline, with the border style, width and radius declared, including settings for spacing and the typography. Now copying this content, I'll paste it directly into my existing theme.json file as part of my site theme. Now returning to my site, I need to ensure that I clear the global styles by selecting Reset to Defaults. After saving those styles, a simple page refresh will apply those changes. The button will now inherit its styles from the theme.json file and is no longer reliant on the database. This process demonstrates how you can use WordPress to automate the creation of the theme.json file, offering you a more convenient and efficient way to develop a modern WordPress block theme. Now, while I've adopted to disable exporting of templates and parts in this process, note that following the same steps with them enabled will give you a different outcome. Patterns placed within your templates won't be exported as template components. Instead, the code will be hard-coded into your templates and parts. So if you decide to go this route, remember that if you intend to distribute your theme, you'll need to manually amend those hard-coded blocks into pattern components. But I'll save that for another video. So I still have a lot to do to finish this site, but for now, this concludes my video on creating a modern WordPress block theme, and I hope it's provided you with some foundational insights. So as always, if you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos like this, please do subscribe. So until next time, I'll see you in the next video.